Today we are going to learn about symbolism, how to identify it and interpret it in poetry. So symbolism is when something represents something else in a story or a poem. For example, a dove is often used to represent peace. On this slide, you're going to see a list of some common symbols in literature. Authors will use different colors or objects to stand in for a different idea. So, for example, hearts are often a symbol for love. You see that during Valentine's Day. Snakes can be seen as evil. Flowers are beautiful and calm. And if a character is in the middle of a storm, it's not just a storm that's going on outside, but sometimes there's a quote unquote storm inside and they're feeling angered or troubled. So symbols are a way for the author to put an image in there, but also tell us something else about that image. So metaphor versus symbol, because I think this is kind of the trickiest part, and I think it's tricky for all levels of language arts students. So a metaphor is when one thing is compared to another directly without using like or as. So the woman's face was a beautiful rose, right? You're just saying there's the woman and there's the rose and we're comparing them. A symbol is when one thing represents another thing. So we have the rose, but it's not being directly compared to something else. It's just representing an idea. So for example, in Beauty and the Beast, the rose can represent the frailty and beauty of love. And it also represents the beast's curse, which was a result of his lack of kindness to a stranger or a lack of love. So it makes sense that when it falls and it's getting destroyed, his chance for love and that beautiful and becoming back to his original beauty is diminishing. Hopefully right away you see a big difference in how I had to explain the symbol versus explaining a metaphor. Which brings us to our next difference between them. A metaphor is the comparison is directly told to the reader, right? So you're going to read the woman's face was a beautiful rose. And therefore, there's just a few correct interpretations. You're kind of saying the woman was beautiful because roses are beautiful. The woman was valuable because roses are valuable. The woman was beautiful and maybe really red. She has red cheeks because roses are red, right? There are several interpretations, but you kind of got to stick with them. But a symbol, on the other hand, the reader has to infer the meaning from the context of the story. So this means there might be many correct meanings because it's just open more to what we notice and draw, and that's kind of sparks our imagination even more than a metaphor. So metaphors are already creative, but symbols can really unleash that creativity for the writer and the reader. So here is a poem called Message from a Caterpillar that uses symbolism. So what I'd like you to do is try to figure out what this main symbol is, and then what does that symbol mean, and we'll look at the context clues. So, Message from a Caterpillar by Lillian Moore. Don't shake this bow, don't try to wake me now. In this cocoon, I've work to do. Inside this silk, I'm changing things. I'm warm like now, but in this dark, I'm growing wings. So the symbol here is a caterpillar, right? Like that is representing something else. Yes, it is a caterpillar. We could read this on the literal surface, just talking about a caterpillar. But as we read, we get a sense that this isn't just a caterpillar. The caterpillar represents something else. So when I look at the context clues, that it's this caterpillar is working and it's changing and it's growing wings, I think, what else do I know that's work and changing and growing wings? And I think about people and people growing and trying to change who they are, but in a good way. Like they're growing up as a person, becoming more emotionally mature, or trying a new skill that requires work. And so the caterpillar can represent people, someone who's changing. It could represent a child who's changing. It could represent an adult who's changing. In fact, like as we see, there's a variety of meanings, and we can say that they're supported by the text, but we can't always agree on the one exact meaning. And that's kind of what's fun with symbols. So here's another poem, The Rose That Grew from Concrete. And I want you to find at least two symbols here in this short little poem. Did you hear about the rose that grew from the crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law is wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. So, in your head, come up with the symbols. I have rose and concrete. So, yes, this could be a straightforward poem. Yep, about a rose, concrete. But the way the poet describes it seems like these represent something else. It's not just a rose, it's not just concrete. So we look at context clues, and I just picked a few that I thought would help me figure out what these could be. You can pick different context clues to look at, but when I see here, this rose is proving nature's long wrong. And so, like, flowers have to follow nature. So it's kind of interesting that it's like proving it wrong because it's growing in a place that it shouldn't, and it's learning to walk, right? So now we're getting like personification of that rose, right? It's doing something different. It's learning to walk. It's learning, and walking is an important part of growing up, of being mature. Keeping dreams. Okay, so now I'm kind of thinking of things that are alive that can keep dreams, and learning to breathe. And breathing can also just be like that life. And so, and then we get this idea of like, what's the concrete? Because no one ever cared. So the rose grew, but no one cared. So everything around it. So, like, this rose can represent like someone, a person who's just in the concrete can represent their troubles, right? So it could just be like the rose is growing, it's got a lot of troubles, but it kept its dream and it's surviving, and the concrete is all the troubles it had around it. It could be something more specific, like the rose is a young, you know, boy or person from the inner city, right? Concrete, like the concrete jungle. um, and it's, not a lot of people expect much from this person, but it kept its dreams and it survived. It broke the cycle. He broke the cycle of poverty. He's creating something great. The rose is something precious also, and that, like, you get this idea that it's beautiful in art. So it could be about artists creating when everything around them is trying to be practical, like roses are like gardens and nature and practical, and concrete can be things like building and planning and cities that are more, you know, used, but maybe in their everyday sense, and more common. So there's a lot of different levels here that you could explore with symbols. Okay, I hope that gave you an insight into symbols. And now I want you guys to read that last poem again, and you're going to be telling me about the theme. So, using your knowledge of the symbols, what is the lesson of that poem? Okay, talk to you later.